The prospects for a deal between the United States and Iran are not looking good, seeing as 21 hours of negotiations in Pakistan reached a deadlock, and the United States initiated a blockade of Hormuz to prevent Iran from instituting a toll system to govern the passage. Thus, the 2 week ceasefire from last Tuesday looks like it will not be renewed, assuming it survives that long. In turn, the question becomes who benefits more from the period of calm. So, today, we need to examine the benefits for each side. I will begin with a quick overview of the situation and how to generally think about ceasefires. Then, in our first substantive point, we will look at the problem that the United States faces, with a focus on refueling. Then we will switch over to Iran and explore one of the unanswered questions about Tehran's remaining capacity. Within that, because the world sucks right now, we will also cover a move that China is making that will complicate our lives further. But let me begin with a general point about ceasefires and where we stand today. The kinetic action between the United States and Iran still seems to be ceased. The general bargaining problem, however, has not been resolved, and Israel continues to take action in Lebanon. Iran, in response, has kept the Strait of Hormuz closed, contrary to the basic premise of the ceasefire. In response, the United States has begun blocking passage of ships paying Iran a toll to skirt the closure. If there was a single word I would use to describe the situation, it would be unsustainable. On the theoretical side of things, friendly reminder that ceasefires do not necessarily align with final outcomes. For any deal to be sustainable, the terms must be commensurate with the long-run balance of power. There is some wiggle room here with how you can structure the deal over time that we will discuss later, but things cannot drift too far from where you are now. I find it humorous how each side of a conflict tends to claim that a ceasefire militarily benefits the other side more than its own. Just think about how many times you have heard something like that over the years regarding Russia and Ukraine. The reality, though, is that mutual gains like that are literally impossible. Power between countries is zero-sum, so whatever one gains, the other loses. The expected outcome line can only shift one way, and thus only one country can be the military beneficiary of the pause. Someone will have extra energy as they exit their calm stance, and someone is going to try to deal double damage as their wrath takes over. As a watcher of the war, the better way to think about such claims is right where we always end back at. It is probably best not to listen to what leaders claim in this regard. Let's imagine that one side will indeed gain more. If that amount is substantial, then deals are infeasible, and the entire conversation is irrelevant. This has been one of the main barriers to a solution in Ukraine. When the power shift is smaller, you can negotiate your way out of the problem. It just requires making a larger substantive concession to the losing side. That losing side knows that the deal will eventually erode away from it. So, to compensate, the deal must give more to that country up front. But thus arises the classic incentive to misrepresent. "Poor me, I need more to accept a deal," is the consistent message that you would want to send regardless of the truth. Consequently, we are stuck actually analyzing what is happening on the ground if we want to know who is the real beneficiary. We can't just look at the words that leaders are saying. Fine, let's do some analysis, starting on the US end. The main discussion here is the trouble that the United States faces with continuing to sustain flight hours of its aerial campaign. That may seem silly given all of the talk heading into the war was about dwindling US munition stockpiles. We will indeed return to the bombs in a moment, but you need planes in the sky to drop most of them. Meanwhile, only a couple of weekends ago, the talk of the war shifted to the downed F-15 and the search for its crew. So you might think that this is where I am going with the rest of this conversation. Not quite, as it turns out. The fighters also have similar problems, but they are not the more proximate concern. Rather, the weak link in the system is the refueling aircraft, the KC-135 in particular. These tankers allow fighters to stay in the air for longer by topping them off mid-flight, They are not just a matter of convenience. They also help maximize the number of relevant hours the more expensive fighters can stay in the air. Without them, the fighters would have to be flying back to base much more frequently. Part of the problem with the tankers is that they are giant chunks of metal that the United States left sitting exposed on the tarmac. That actually connects to the utility of a ceasefire, as more Ukrainian anti-drone systems will become operational along the Arabian Peninsula. Those Arab countries may view Ukraine's systems as primarily protecting civilian infrastructure, but that is not how an air defense network works. An interceptor sees a drone, and it kills a drone, not knowing what the drone was intending to target. Regardless, the bigger problem is simple flight hours math. The last KC-135 was produced in 1965. That was not a typo. 1965. They are from an era when the median price of a US house was about $20,000. Gasoline was 31 cents a gallon, and the Beatles were still 5 years away from breaking up. On one hand, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, though they have actually fixed the KC-135 over the decades with a number of upgrades. On the other hand, the KC-46 replacement aircraft is slowly being rolled out. In the meantime, there is a ton of pressure to keep the 135s in the air. But physics triumphs over hopes and dreams when age and flight hours are high. Obviously, simple maintenance and repairs occur in theater every day. But more serious repairs require hauling the planes all the way back to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma. So, according to the theory, the United States initiated the ceasefire to buy time to refresh the refuelers, as well as to rest the rest of the fleet. And in the absence of a sufficiently attractive offer from Iran, the United States will continue the effort with a revitalized Air Force once the ceasefire comes to a close. Well, I have no doubt that the United States is making the most of its opportunity to repair its fleet. But whether the United States benefits militarily from a ceasefire is not a function of this incentive alone. Rather, we must also consider what Iran is doing, and make the appropriate relative comparison between the two. Okay, then what is Iran doing? Unfortunately, the answer to this question is more opaque, which will cloud our ability to confidently assess the relative comparison. But let's try our best. One part that we have greater clarity on is Iran's ability to rebuild its various weapons programs. In the short run, this is a non-issue. Iran will have to spend significant time rebuilding the corresponding facilities and supply chains. This creates an open question about exactly how long it will be before the United States or Israel might be tempted to target Iran's defense industrial base. But in terms of ceasefire timelines, not much will change for Iran on this front. The harder problem, both in terms of public information and ceasefire timing, is how many weapons, and, most critically, anti-aircraft weapons, Iran kept bunkered during the war. If you are under the impression that the answer is none, they needed everything that they had, and so they deployed everything that they had, then the rest of this question is academic. There is nothing for Iran to redeploy, and so the ceasefire is irrelevant to deployment decisions. If not, then the United States faces a significant problem. Step 1 of an aerial war is to destroy the target's anti-aircraft systems. Once the skies are open to you and you alone, your fleet can operate unencumbered to destroy more valuable or finer-grained targets. To grossly simplify matters, the United States relies on systems like Tomahawk missiles for the anti-aircraft part of the campaign. The idea is that you can cover enough distance to hit your opponent's assets, but they cannot hit you. Do you see the problem here? Tomahawks and the like are the main source of concern about US stockpiles, as it relates to a potential war in the Indo-Pacific. If the Iran war pauses for a significant period of time, and Iran was in fact holding significant air defense assets underground, then the Tomahawks become necessary to use again. Compare that to a world of sustained strikes, where if US intelligence remains on top of the situation, the fighters can just drop JDAMs instead. That was what the main strike campaign had become, with Tomahawks held in reserve. In contrast to Tomahawks, the military views the supply of JDAMs as effectively bottomless. So a lengthy pause could force the United States to trade a set of weapons with a low opportunity cost for a set of weapons with a high opportunity cost. The refueling problem still exists, of course, but the solution is not to make wholesale repairs to the entire fleet all at once. It is to segment a certain percentage for maintenance at all times, so that fresh aircraft are constantly returning to the system. This is the same system that the United States uses for its aircraft carriers, so it is not like it is a foreign concept. Doing so might require slowing the pace of overall sorties, but it is still better than giving Iran a free opportunity to breathe. Now, we should recognize a major problem with the US arsenal. The Iran War, or at least its initial phase, lasted about 40 days. I would describe the intensity of fighting as elevated, but not extreme. And after that, all indications are that the Pentagon is seeing major gaps in its Tomahawk stockpiles. Well, that being the case, does anyone think that the January-era Tomahawk stockpiles were sufficient for a serious war against China? Hardly. The shortage has always required a substantial reinvestment in arms production, which administration, after administration, after administration, after administration put off. Obviously, the Trump administration has been much tighter about US weapons shipped to Ukraine. But Biden was also cautious. This is why. We therefore now find ourselves in a situation where the United States will face significant problems if China made a move in the next few months. Whether the United States will have those same problems in the next few years depends on the investment and production decisions made in the shadow of this war. Speaking of China, there are increased reports that Beijing is looking to supply Iran with more anti-aircraft systems, particularly of the portable variety. This would be a lot easier if the skies were open thanks to a ceasefire. The naval path certainly is not. But recall how Russia has been rumored to be sending materiel to Iran, likely through the Caspian Sea. It would not be hard for China to use Russia as an intermediary, even if it complicates the logistics by a bit. Consequently, this is something to keep in mind, but it will not be pivotal to the ceasefire decision. So, what are our takeaway lines for today? Everyone likes to claim that ceasefires hurt their chances if a war restarts. This is just a negotiation tactic, which you should therefore ignore. Practically speaking, the United States benefits from a pause because it can service its aging tanker fleet. But that comes at the cost of Iran potentially having the opportunity to retool its anti-aircraft systems. All told, I suspect that it is the latter concern that wins out. I could imagine a world where the United States lives with Iranian air defenses recovering, despite the Tomahawk trouble it may cause down the line. But that requires the United States to find the deal now to be relatively favorable. The strait remaining closed is nothing of the sort. So something has to give here. Maybe it will be Iran conceding on Hormuz and allowing international traffic to continue as normal. Maybe it will be the United States restarting hostilities, perhaps at 2 weeks, perhaps before, or perhaps a little after. Maybe the United States will hold off a little more to see how effective its counter-blockade will be. But it is hard to envision a world where you have a sustained ceasefire and a closed strait. That is the worst of both worlds for Washington. Well, we will see how many critical news stories break over the next week, but I suspect that I will be spending more time over on Lines on Maps Extra for the next handful of days. Subscribe there to stay in the loop. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.